Alors, collègues, bon après-midi. On va commencer. Et on va commencer avec l'approbation de l'ordre du jour. J'espère que c'est en forme acceptable. Quelque chose à ajouter à l'ordre du jour? Sinon, on peut passer au procès-verbal de la réunion du 7 février 2011. Est-ce qu'il y a des changements à y apporter? Modifications? Commentaires là-dessus? Sinon, tout ça en faveur? Opposed? Abstentions? OK, un seul. Alors, maintenant, on passe aux questions découlant du procès-verbal. Est-ce qu'il y en a? Sinon, on a deux choses qui seront présentées par Joanne Bourdage concernant les règlements scolaires. Est-ce que Joanne est ici? Oui, merci. S'il vous plaît.
Alors, le premier élément, c'est la création d'un règlement scolaire portant sur une politique générale sur le transfert des crédits. C'est l'information que vous avez apparaissait dans les annuaires des facultés. Ce que nous voulons faire, c'est uniformiser les textes et avoir un même règlement pour l'ensemble de l'université. Il s'agit donc d'uniformiser le texte selon les ententes avec l'Université Saint-Paul, avec l'Université Carleton, avec le Collège dominicain et aussi pour l'obtention d'une lettre de permission pour une institution avec laquelle l'Université d'Ottawa n'a pas d'entente formelle.
Gary?
Juste une suggestion, ça apparaît dans le document, mais la page titre ne dit pas que c'est seulement pour les études de premier cycle. C'est très important de réaliser que...
On a une note sur la justification,
oui,
par exemple.
À la page 1. Oui.
Non, je comprends, mais la page titre de la proposition ne le disait pas.
Le titre du règlement devait le contenir à ce moment-là.
Oui. Parce qu'on a des programmes conjoints avec l'Université Carleton et toutes sortes d'ententes différentes aux études supérieures. Après avoir essayé avec Joanne de corriger ça pour inclure études supérieures et premier cycle, c'est un spaghetti d'exception à moins que, et donc on a décidé qu'on allait faire une politique séparée pour les études supérieures, ce serait plus clair.
OK. Est-ce que c'est acceptable, Joanne?
Oui, tout à fait.
Oui, Geneviève?
Moi, c'est simplement quelques petits mises au point plus stylistiques, ça ne touche pas au fond. Le fond, je suis tout à fait d'accord, mais on avait décidé, je crois, d'enlever toute notion de programme d'échange, alors qu'il reste encore de temps à autre le mot échange, par exemple à la page 1, quand on dit être inscrit à l'Université d'Ottawa, c'est pour la session durant laquelle se fera l'échange. Simplement m'assurer que ces petits changements soient faits dans le document. Il y en a un autre qui concerne un autre établissement, alors que le autre n'a pas de lieu d'être à la page 11. Alors, si vous permettez...
Excusez-moi, s'il vous plaît, Geneviève. Monsieur, excusez-moi, we have a policy of no photographs inside the Senate chamber. That's why we have being filmed for posterity, so everybody can see it. Merci. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Geneviève.
Non, ça va. Alors, tout ce que je vais simplement demander, moi je suis pas d'accord avec le fond, si vous me permettez de simplement soumettre à Joanne des petites corrections stylistiques.
Oui.
Ça ne touche absolument pas le fond.
Très bien. Merci. Autre question ou commentaire? Alors, est-ce qu'on peut passer au deuxième? Est-ce qu'on peut voter? Pardon?
On devrait voter séparément.
Oui, madame.
Est-ce qu'il y a une version anglaise?
Pardon?
Est-ce qu'il y a une version anglaise pour ce règlement?
Joanne?
Il va y avoir une version anglaise peut-être, oui.
Alors,
Elle n'a pas été soumise au Sénat.
l'approbation est seulement pour la version française, n'est-ce pas?
Oui, pour la version anglaise au Sénat à ce moment-là qu'à la version française.
Oui.
Il n'y a pas de profession.
Alors, il faut voter chaque fois. All those in favor of this item 4? Are any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Alors, on peut passer au numéro 5, modification.
Alors, il s'agit de la modification du règlement scolaire portant sur la période officielle d'examen qui a été approuvée au Sénat en décembre dernier. La faculté de médecine a demandé d'être ajoutée dans la note Ce règlement ne s'applique pas à la faculté d'éducation, aux études médicales de premier cycle et à la faculté des études supérieures et postdoctorales. La structure du programme de la faculté de médecine est différente et ne permet pas ce genre, en fait, ne permet pas l'application de ce règlement. Ce que je comprends, c'est que le curriculum est organisé par unité et les examens se font à la fin de chacune des unités, donc il n'y a pas de période officielle d'examen.
Question? Catherine?
At risk of sounding like I'm channeling Gary Slater, I think it would be appropriate to have in the title Règlement scolaire portant sur les périodes officielles des examens au baccalauréat. It seems strange to have write studies just as a note at the end, as an exception.
Is that okay, Joanne? Mona?
Moi, j'ai juste une question pour le doyen de la faculté de droit. Est-ce que ça s'applique à la faculté de droit, puis peut-être aussi à la faculté d'éducation?
Non.
Autrement dit, les...
La faculté d'éducation de chaque
C'est marqué que ça ne s'applique pas à eux,
Ok,
parce
mais-
qu'ils n'ont pas différent.
Il s'agit
Mais le droit, ça marche, là?
Il n'y avait pas d'objection à ce moment-là. Il n'y avait que médecine qui est revenue pour demander d'être ajoutée par la suite.
Okay.
Il y a une période d'examen en plus.
Autre question? Okay. Everybody in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. On peut passer maintenant à l'item 6, c'est-à-dire proposition déposée par un membre étudiant sur l'entente de réciprocité entre l'Université d'Ottawa et l'Université d'Haïfa. Alors, M. Ricky?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to ensure that the information package for this motion has been passed out. Have the senators received that?
I think you circulated it yourself last week, as I recall.
In fact, it has been confirmed by the Secretary's office that it would be distributed in print version this afternoon.
That you also sent it around electronically, I think, last week. Is that right?
I sent the majority of the items, yes.
First of all, first things first. You have a motion to
I'd like
to
first
present?
just to wait until we distribute all the information, and then I'll carry on with the presentation of the motion.
Yes, I'll be asking you first to put your motion, so there's something to discuss.
Yes, I will proceed with the presentation, and then we can proceed to putting forward the motion after the guest speakers have commented.
I don't think so. The policy of the Senate, as we've made clear, is that some members of the Senate have the right to speak, Mr. Hickey.
Well, I will commence with the presentation now. This motion today is about the exchange program.
Excuse me, before you speak to the motion, could you table it and let's get it seconded in front of the Senate properly?
Well, Mr. Rock, it has been the practice in the past for the motion to be presented first before it is tabled. And so I'll go ahead and proceed.
No, I want you to table the motion first. Let's get it seconded, and then we can talk about it, all right? That's the order in which I do things. Would you table the motion, Mr.
Well,
Hickey?
for example, at the last meeting of the Senate, the registrar did present the motion before it was seconded.
I'd like you to table the motion. Let's get it seconded, and then we can discuss it.
If we must, then I would table the motion, and I believe I have a seconder.
Who is your seconder?
Okay.
So that's the motion that we have in the materials here?
That's right. Now, this motion is about the Exchange Masters in Law program between the University of Ottawa and the University of Haifa in Israel. I'm bringing this motion up because I have several concerns about the program that I believe should be addressed before the Senate can be confident that the program will reflect the values of the university and provide all students who participate.
Hang on a second. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Hickey. Someone's filming from the audience. Would you stop that, please, sir? We have a policy of the Senate not to film or take photographs within the Senate chamber. We already have somebody recording it here for the purpose of the Senate's records.
So if it's being filmed already, is there a problem with it?
Yeah, I'm not going to enter into a discussion with you. We went through this last year. Members of the Senate give their permission to be filmed by the official videographer. They don't give their permission to be filmed or photographed by anybody else. I would ask you to stop that, please.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, if I'd like to present a motion.
Just a second,
at
Mr.
this
Hickey.
point.
Is that understood, sir? Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Hickey.
Yes. I would support independent filming of the Senate meetings. I think that it's we could only add to the reproduction and the storage of information and the archival.
Well, now we're talking about your
institutional
motion, so we just stick to the motion. Let's get on with that, please.
I'll go ahead then. I'm bringing this motion up because I have a few concerns about the program that I believe should be addressed before the Senate can be confident that the program will reflect the values of the university and provide all the students who participate with the kind of educational experience mandated by the mission of the university. There are three concerns. The first one is that this is a unique academic program which the Senate did not discuss and examine. The second concern is that the Senate and the University of Ottawa needs to guarantee that there will be full and equitable access to the program for all students without any discrimination based on race. The third concern is that there was a scholarship program. There is a scholarship program that is intimately tied to this program. And the details, in fact, the scholarship agreement must be made public before the program can proceed. So regarding the first concern, this is a unique academic program that the Senate did not discuss or examine. I'd like to refer your attention, please, to item number 1 in the information package. And you'll notice the items are numbered in the top left-hand corner. Document number 1 is the program description. Now, this program has its own application requirements, a special 2-degree structure. And if you look at the second last paragraph on the second page, it has a unique scholarship program funded by the Gerald Swartz and Heather Reisman Foundation. It is a unique academic program. However, there seems to have been some confusion on the part of the administration about how to categorize the program. If you look at documents number 3 and number 4 in the information package, you will find 2 press releases issued by the university about the exchange program. The first press release, number 3, was released in the morning on February 7th, before our last Senate meeting. The exchange program is called a joint program, or a program, many times in the document. Now, I brought up that the program had not been examined or discussed at the Senate at our last meeting, and I was informed, that we were all informed by the Dean of Graduate Studies, Dr. Slater. He clarified that it was not a program. When I made reference to the press release and stated my concern that it could be misinformation to be calling it a program many times in the press release, Mr. Rock informed us that unfortunately the majority of senators didn't know what I was talking about. However, later that evening I looked on the university website and I noticed that the press release had been removed. Several days later, the press release was reissued to the website, and this is document number 4 in your package. You'll notice that the word program has been replaced by the word exchange in every instance, including in the quotes of the Dean of Common Law, Bruce Velthusen, and Professor of Law, Michael Geist. Now, I mention this to point out that there is significant ambiguity here, relevant to the Senate authority over academic programs, in relation to what kind of a program we are dealing with. It is a unique academic program with its own scholarship, its own application process, and a special 2-degree structure. Students will come to the university specifically for this program. Now, the Executive Committee of the Senate was provided with the request to create the program in May of 2008. And the Senate was provided a copy of the Executive Committee's minutes in September 2008. And the request to the Executive Committee is the final document in the package, number 10. The Executive Committee's minutes is document number 9. So the Senate approved the minutes of the Executive Committee in September 2008. But has the Senate ever delegated its authority to the Executive Committee to hold the substantive discussions on the creation of unique academic programs of this type? This is not known. The Vice President of Governance's office does not know. In fact, there is currently an ongoing search through the university archives to discover if this task was ever delegated to the Executive Committee. And it seems unlikely to me that the Executive Committee was ever given this task by the Senate to examine and essentially approve or disapprove the creation of unique programs. The administration has suggested that the new program is simply a reciprocity agreement, a purely administrative arrangement to facilitate credit equivalencies, and that therefore the Senate need not consider it in plenary discussion, as is the correct practice for new academic programs. Until the Senate knows when, if ever, and under what circumstances the Executive Committee was given this duty, I believe the application process to the program should be put on hold. I'd also like to suggest to my colleagues, members of the Senate, that if the Senate is going to delegate its authority to democratically examine new academic programs of this type, then there is little point left to the Senate as a plenary body of collegial governance. The second concern is that the University of Ottawa and the Senate should guarantee full and equitable access to the program for all students without racial discrimination. I have this concern because of a number of articles and letters from students describing the discrimination they have suffered at the University of Haifa in Israel. Especially of concern is document number 5 in your information package. And this is a report by Adala, the Legal Center for Arab Minority Rights in Israel, that determined this, a report about a court decision that determined that the University of Haifa had acted illegally and discriminated against Arab students in the allocation of student housing. I'd like to quickly read for you from this report. You'll notice that in the first paragraph there is a highlighted section that says the Haifa District Court issued a precedent-setting judgment that the inclusion of military service as a criterion for determining the allocation of student housing at the University of Haifa is illegal. In the fourth paragraph, you'll see in the first sentence, the decision is precedent-setting as it represents the first incidence in which an Israeli court has decided that the military service criterion discriminates against Arab students, that Haifa University has discriminated against Arab students. It is troubling to me that the University of Ottawa has engaged in a new program with a foreign university that has been proven in court to have discriminated against students based on race in the past, and that the University of Ottawa has not openly demonstrated that we have ensured the new program will be absolutely free of racial discrimination. Document number 8 in your information package is an article by the Jewish Tribune that was printed last week. And in this article, towards the end, there is a statement from Stephen Plott, Dr. Stephen Plott, an economics professor at the University of Haifa, in which he critically commented on this present motion to our Senate, and he drew the comparison between Arab students in Israel and First Nations people in Canada. In Canada, we are familiar with the conditions of economic apartheid that First Nations people are forced to live under. And so I think Professor Plott's comparison should give us the motivation to ensure that an affirmative action policy for Arab students is in place on the admission process to this new exchange program. Professor Plott also stated that the University of Haifa now in fact grants affirmative action preferences to Arab students in the admission processes in some programs, also in hiring, in scholarships, and in dorm space. Now, because of the 2006 court ruling that the University of Haifa had discriminated against Arab students, and because of the many reports from Palestinian students that they have suffered discrimination at the University of Haifa, the Senate should require the affirmative action guarantee that applications be selected in such a way that the percentage of Palestinian students accepted into the program at the University of Haifa be equal to or greater than the percentage of Palestinian people living in Israel. Haifa University already recognizes this need by having implemented several such affirmative action programs on its campus. Affirmative action policies are a proven method to reduce discrimination in free, pluralistic, and democratic societies. In practice, this means that if only one Palestinian student is qualified to be accepted 1 year, then at most only 4 academically qualified non-Arab Israeli students can be accepted that year. Until this measure is put in place, applications to the exchange program in-laws should not be accepted. This would maintain the university's reputation in defending Canadian values and would satisfy the considered criticisms of potential discrimination of this program. It would also strengthen the learning experience and the value of the program. Now, the third concern is that the scholarship agreement for the program must be disclosed. The exchange program has a dedicated scholarship funded generously by the Gerald Swartz and Heather Reisman Foundation. As I mentioned before, this is indicated in the details of the program, which was document number 1. The scholarship is intimately and uniquely tied to the academic program, so the Senate needs to see the terms of reference of the scholarship. Neither the Executive Committee's minutes reported to the Senate in September 2008, nor the program proposal, which was initially submitted to the Executive Committee in May 2008, mentioned that there was a unique scholarship tied to the program. This is a serious concern with repercussions on academic freedom. Here we have a situation where the administration appears to have facilitated that an academic program would be intimately tied to a scholarship agreement and expected the Senate to approve the program without knowing the details of the scholarship agreement. This means that there would be an undisclosed involvement and a possible influence of donors with the new academic program. So in brief, when donors are involved, the Senate needs to know. The Senate needs to know the details that can impact the substance of the academic program and academic freedom as related to the program. Dear colleagues, members of the Senate, I submit to you that this is not a difficult point or an elusive point, but one that should be obvious to every student, professor, and other academic involved in our collegial governance. This is why I have proposed that we put the application process for the program on hold until the scholarship agreement is made public and is examined by the Senate, possibly by an appropriate subcommittee first and then brought to the plenary body of the Senate. And now I have requested of President Rock before the meeting today if we could see that signed scholarship agreement, and he informed me that we would have that discussion here before the Senate this afternoon. And so,
well, just to make it clear, you asked me the question whether it would be produced, and I said I was not going to discuss it with you. The matter would be discussed this afternoon when you put your motion. That's what happened.
Right. So I understood that we would discuss that.
No, it was that I was not going to talk to you separately. Whatever discussion occurs will occur here in the open in the Senate. That's what I was communicating to you.
Okay. Well, I think it would be important if the authorities involved who have been involved with the scholarship agreement would let the Senate know if it can be made public today at this meeting. I think it's an urgent matter as applications are ongoing to the program. And so finally now, document number 7 is a July 31st, 2008 article about a trip made by 6 Canadian university presidents to Israel, including President Alan Rock for the University of Ottawa. The academic program with HEPA was apparently a direct result of this trip. And this is an article by the Canadian Jewish News. So it's alarming to me that these 6 presidents went on this trip because it is a well-known practice for pro-Israel lobby groups to fund visits of university presidents to Israel. And this is occurring in a broad geopolitical context.
Mr. Hickey, forgive me for interrupting you, but you are going to point out, aren't you, that I told you last Friday I was not on that trip? I was not in Israel in 2008. I've never been to the University of Haifa, and I have never been to Israel to discuss this or any other proposal.
Yes, Mr. Rock did tell me that in person on Friday, and I will get to that very soon. So the trip of the 6 presidents is troubling because it is well-known practice for pro-Israel lobby groups to fund visits of university presidents to Israel. And this is occurring in a context in which Israel has responded by funding a large so-called Brand Israel campaign that aims to create academic and cultural exchanges for international political reasons. In addition, there is an international civil society call for academic boycott of Israel that specifically calls to boycott precisely the type of interinstitutional exchange that we are talking about here. Now, for example, in 2005, one of Haifa University's own professors, Mr. Ilan Pape, strongly argued in support of the boycott. He said, "I believe that unless external pressure is brought to bear on Israeli institutions involved in the occupation, including universities, the barbaric occupation of the West Bank and Gaza Strip will continue." And Mr. Rock and I did meet on Friday, and he confirmed to me in person that he did not go to Israel in 2008. However, the article reports that a president of the University of Ottawa went to Israel at some time, and this exchange program in laws resulted. Now, Mr. Rock has confirmed that he has never been to the University of Haifa, not in 2007, 2008, or 2009. But was it the former president, Mr. Gilles Patry, who engaged in this trip? These are questions that, in my view, this is a question that should be answered immediately. It continues to appear that the exchange with the University of Haifa was not a program that came from academic need or merit, from individual law professors, for example, needing to collaborate in order to better and most efficiently accomplish the mission of the university, but rather a political arrangement facilitated by funding from unidentified private donors and a lobbying association called the Canadian Council for Israel and Jewish Advocacy. All of these unclear circumstances, a trip by university presidents to Israel, funded by private donors and a lobbying group, resulting in the creation of academic programs. All of these circumstances make it more necessary for the Senate to put a hold on the application process for the University of Ottawa, University of Haifa exchange program in laws, until we can examine if the program was created for broader political reasons that go beyond the university's academic mission. I would now like to present our first guest to speak to the motion.
Mr. Hickey, it's only members of the Senate who have the right to speak in the Senate.
Ms. Diana Ralph has been invited, and I would like to invite her now to speak. She's from the National Organization Independent Jewish Voices.
Mr. Hickey,
I've extended these invitations to guest speakers for more than 2 weeks, and I have not received any response contrary to the idea of having
the rule of the Senate is only members of the Senate have the right to speak here. And,
well, I would like to present Ms. Ralph to speak.
Well, I'm sure you would, but I'm telling you that the Senate does its business on the basis that it's members of the Senate who participate in discussion here, not those who are not members of the Senate. So I urge you to go on with your presentation.
I find it highly disrespectful that I was not informed, that our speakers were not informed.
They were informed. My office received notice that an association from Carleton University would be here, and we sent back an email saying they were going to speak. And my office sent back a response saying, "You're welcome to come. It's a public meeting, but only members of the Senate can speak."
Okay. Well,
I was not informed of that.
Well, I'm informing you now, Madame. That's the rule of the Senate.
I extended these invitations with more than adequate time in advance to correct any procedural problems that could have resulted from these invitations. And I find it very disrespectful and contrary to the democratic nature of the Senate that calls for the community to examine matters important to our institution. If there had been a problem with having the guest speakers speak today, they could have been informed before they spent time preparing their presentations, took time out of their work days to come here today. There are also members
Could the discussion be limited to the motion?
Have you anything else to say with respect to your motion, Mr. Hickey? I mean, the rules are clear. We've always had the policy that members of the Senate are the only ones who speak in this forum. And when my office was told that there would be someone coming with the expectation that they would speak, we did respond by saying, you will not be allowed to speak.
Yes, I informed your office as well as the Vice President of Governance's office several times that I had invited guest speakers, including Students for Palestinian Human Rights Ottawa.
Well, that may be.
As well as independent Jewish voices.
That may be, but...
And so I would appeal to the Senate then to please uphold our respect for the concerned parties of the community to hear the presentation on the motion by Ms. Diana Ralph of Independent Jewish Voices.
The Senate has long since adopted its own process, and one of the principles that the Senate has always adhered to is that members of the Senate are those who discuss business before the Senate. It's not a forum in which we receive deputations from outside, like a city council. It's an academic body which discusses its own issues by itself. If you have anything else to say about the motion, I urge you to say it now. Mr. Hickey, have you anything else to say about the motion?
I have more comments to make regarding the motion.
Thank you.
Yes, members of the Senate, I am dismayed that the President's office or the Secretary's office has not informed us that guest speakers would not be permitted to present. I find that very disrespectful to the members of the community, the concerned parties that I have invited here today. It would have been extremely simple to send an email to all members of the Senate clarifying this matter if it was a problem at any point. I find it very disingenuous to be bringing this up now at the meeting when people have taken time out of their day to come here. However, Ms. Ralph of Independent Jewish Voices has presented me with what she would have said here today, and so I'll read it. This is in relation to the motion that I have just presented to you. Now, Ms. Diana Ralph would have said, I represent Independent Jewish Voices Canada. We are a national organization of Jews. We have active chapters across Canada in Halifax, Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, Hamilton, Winnipeg, and Vancouver. We promote a just resolution to the conflict in Israel-Palestine through international law and respect for the human rights of all parties. We support Senator Hickey's motion for the following reasons. All Israeli universities, including the University of Haifa, facilitate and benefit from Israeli violations of international law and human rights. They have been intimately connected with the Israeli project of nation building, including the presence of large and influential military, strategic, and security institutes, programs or centers, operating in academic research policy and teaching. Shin Bet agents do intelligence and surveillance work on campuses, particularly targeting Arab students and organizations. Virtually all Jewish students and staff at Israeli universities do their Army Reserve duty for at least 1 month a year. Omar Barghouti, the founder of the Cultural and Academic Boycott, points out, in fact, no Israeli university has ever come out against the occupation ever. The total number of Israeli academics that have ever condemned the occupation, just the occupation, let alone apartheid in Israel, or the denial of refugee rights, is a few hundred out of a community that's 9,000. In 2008, 4 Jewish Israeli academics started a petition calling upon the Israeli military in their territories. They did not even call it occupied territories, in the territories to allow passage at military roadblocks to Palestinian academics and students going to their schools and universities. The most banal demand for academic freedom. And they sent it to all 9,000 academics hoping almost everyone would sign. Any decent, self-respecting academic should endorse this basic requirement. Only 407 signed this petition out of 9,000. Stan Cohen, a former Israeli professor, raises an even more relevant point, particularly for this discussion about a law school exchange. Imagine law professors writing critical articles about the illegality of the occupation and its farcical enforcement of the rule of law, while at the same time doing their military service as judges and prosecutors in the military court system. Some Israeli universities have campuses on stolen Palestinian land in the West Bank. Therefore, Independent Jewish Voices supports the Palestinian civil society call for a boycott of academic institutions, not individuals. The University of Haifa overtly and covertly discriminates against its Palestinian students. Senator Hickey has mentioned several. For example, priority given to housing students who have served in the Israeli military. Here are others. The University of Haifa website is available in English, French, Spanish, Russian, and German, but not Arabic. The University of Haifa fired respected Israeli Jewish Holocaust survivor, Ilan Pape, because of his political views. The third point, this specific program or exchange is sponsored by two of the key founders and leaders for the Canadian Council for Israel and Jewish Advocacy, a right-wing, militaristic organization which advocates uncritical support for Israel. This is scarcely an unbiased, objective promotion of academic research. For an example, the Hesek Foundation, founded by Heather Reisman and Gerald Schwartz, funds lone soldiers, essentially mercenary soldiers with no family in Israel. And I would like to point out that the Heather Reisman and Gerald Schwartz Foundation provided the scholarship, or the unique scholarship for this program. The fourth point, finally, in view of the successful democratic revolutions sweeping through the Middle East, largely in solidarity with Palestinian justice, we urge the University of Ottawa to stand on the side of justice and democracy, rather in solidarity with the repressive and illegal actions of the Israeli state. As Uri Avneri warned this past week, concepts like democracy, liberty, justice, and human rights are not only moral values. In today's world, they have become essential needs, a basis for a new world order. That is the right side of history. That is how history is moving. Anyone who places himself on the wrong side of it will pay the price. But our country, Israel, is closing its eyes to this. True, it excels in the most international of industries, high tech, and is working successfully to extend its economic ties to the far corners of the world. But it scorns international public opinion, the United Nations, and international law. Israel's democracy, in which we took so much pride, is in mortal danger. I'd like to thank Ms. Diana Ralph for preparing this speech from Independent Jewish Voices Canada. I had also invited members of Students for Palestinian Human Rights, as well as members of the group Hillel Ottawa and the Gerald Schwartz and Heather Reisman Foundation. I would like to know if any of the members of Hillel or the Schwartz Reisman Foundation have come. They have not responded to my invitation. And seeing no response, I noticed that a member of Students for Palestinian Human Rights.
We'll transfer a document in the next week if we cannot speak on institutional racism in Haifa.
Ben, nous avons répondu à cette association par courriel.
Malheureusement, nous, on n'a pas reçu de réponse.
Alors, c'était envoyé de mon bureau, M. Hickey.
Mr. Rock, you mentioned to the Senate that you sent an email to Saya Carlton, which is Students Against Israeli Apartheid. This is a different group.
I see. That may be.
This is a University of Ottawa group that I explicitly mentioned in many emails, had been invited, and at one point with more than adequate time, I mentioned that they had confirmed that some members would be present today.
Okay.
Now, Bruno Marcotte from a member of SPHR, has informed me that he will send information for the senators to review following this meeting. Do I have that correct?
Yeah.
And it was about...
Merci.
Notre document propose de
Merci. Mr. Hickey, have you anything else to say with respect to your motion?
Yes. Thank you.
I
Thank you for hearing the
I
presentation.
call for closure on the presentation of the motion.
Yes.
Well, have you finished, Mr. Hickey?
I have but one request to the Senate now, and that would be that looking at the motion itself, which is included in the package that you received last week with the agenda on the top, you'll notice that the motion itself has a number of whereas statements. In fact, 6 whereas statements and 5 therefore statements. And I would like for the Senate to vote on each therefore statement individually. Attached to the final statement, which is that the Joint Masters in Laws program shall be frozen and the application process put on hold. So we can pair that last statement that the program would be frozen with each of the preceding therefore statements and make then 4 separate votes. And with that, I would complete the presentation.
So you're proposing that you have 6 recitals and 5 operative paragraphs. You're proposing that we vote separately on each of the operative paragraphs. Is that what you're suggesting?
Correct. With each of the first 4 therefore paragraphs would also include the final therefore paragraph.
Well, I'm not sure I understand that. If we pass the 5th one, I mean, it stands on its own, does it not? Otherwise, you're amending your motion.
Well, we could vote on the...
If we divide it as you suggest, you're going to get a vote on each, including the last.
Well, procedurally, the goal of the motion is to put the program on hold until certain concerns have been addressed.
So that's what you've asked for in number 5?
That's correct. However, each of the preceding operative paragraphs would also, according to the motion, require that the program be put on hold. And so therefore, I would include that 5th operative paragraph with each of the preceding 4 paragraphs. In other words, the Senate would vote on the statements having taken into account the whereas statements. Therefore, the Senate requires the date and circumstances surrounding the delegation of its power to approve new exchange programs and reciprocity agreements to its executive committee to be provided to it, along with, therefore, the Joint Masters in Laws exchange program shall be frozen and the application process put on hold until the above action has been carried out by the Senate.
Alors, so you're amending your motion so that each of the operative paragraphs include, and that the Joint Masters in Laws exchange program shall be frozen and the application process put on hold until the above actions have been carried out by the Senate?
That's correct.
Is that supported by your seconder?
Yeah.
All right.
Of course, it would read until the above action, singular, has been carried out by the Senate in that case.
All right. Alors, est-ce qu'il y a autre discussion concernant la résolution ou les résolutions? Other discussion? Interventions? You just had a chance. I'm just going to see if anybody else wants to speak. If not, Mr. Hickey?
Sorry.
Public?
Sorry. Just a question to clarify. If we're going to vote on each of the operative paragraphs separately, each one we're voting for in the context of all the whereases, all of the preambular paragraphs?
Yes.
So, all right.
Linda?
I'm still not clear as to what I'm voting on.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but it's just not clear to me. So if I do the first therefore, it comes automatically attached with the proposal that we freeze. Is that
Yes,
correct?
what's being proposed by the mover and seconder is that the first motion be, the Senate requires the date and circumstances surrounding the delegation of its power to approve new exchange programs and reciprocity agreements to its executive committee be provided to it, and the joint Masters-in-Law exchange program shall be frozen and the application process put on hold until that action has been carried out by the Senate. Is that right?
That's correct.
And it would be the same for each of the operative paragraphs. That's what's being proposed?
Now, in fact, in response to Professor Curry's question, not every whereas. You'll notice that each whereas statement corresponds to a therefore statement.
All right, then let's get on with it if we may, and call the vote in the absence of other discussion. I beg your pardon?
I have some discussion points to raise.
Well, yeah, you've concluded, and we're now going to call the vote.
Well, I would like to know if the contract for the scholarship will be made public.
Well, I think you can save that for, I'll raise that under other questions if you want. Let's focus on your motion.
I'd like to know that in relation to this motion, I believe it's an urgent concern that the signed agreement must be made public immediately. And so I would request the appropriate authority who would be here today, I'm confident, to confirm that agreement will be made.
Okay, that is a separate matter, and I undertake to you we'll come back to it. But right now I'm going to call the vote.
Will the agreement be made public, Mr. Robb?
I beg your pardon?
Will the agreement be made public?
We're going to come back to that question, Mr. Hickey, during this meeting. But right now I'm going to call the vote on your motion.
I think it's a simple yes or no question. Can we see the signed
I'm going to come
agreement?
back to that subject. Right now I'm going to call the vote on your motion.
So you
and
will
I
come
first
back to
of
that
all
subject.
put the motion with respect to the first operative paragraph. And this vote, the motion is as follows: for people to vote yes or no or to abstain. That the Senate requires the date and circumstances surrounding the delegation of its power to approve new exchange programs and reciprocity agreements to its executive committee be provided to it.
I believe there's a question.
And that the joint Masters-in-Law exchange program shall be frozen and the application process put on hold until the above actions have been carried out by the Senate.
According to the law of the university, this is misleading. It's actually the Senate that decides what it wants to vote on. By default, if it doesn't choose to vote on something, it's the executive of Senate that does it. So we cannot find anything that gives the permission to the executive to do it, because by default, it's the executive that votes on everything, except those things that the Senate chose to vote on. And we have no history, as far as I can tell, of voting on exchange programs at the Senate. You've been sitting in the Senate for several months. I've been sitting in the Senate for years. I don't remember having seen any exchange program on the agenda of Senate. So my guess is that in the past, the Senate has never requested to vote on exchange program.
Well, that's helpful.
I'd like to,
what I want to do is get to the vote on this motion if we can.
I'd like to respond to that discussion point.
That's what I don't want to do, is get into an endless back and forth about this. I think we've had your presentation.
We're not having a discussion on this aspect of the motion. And so I would like to request Mr. Slater or
Okay, you
other
respond
experienced
briefly,
members of
Mr.
the
Hickey, and then we're going to get on to the vote. Will you respond, please, briefly?
I have a question, yes. In what manner are tasks delegated to the executive committee?
It's not the executive, there's
By
no
the Senate.
delegation according to the law of the university. The executive committee first vote on everything that goes to Senate, according to what I read. This is the law. And then the Senate decides what it wants to vote on. The Senate has never decided to vote on exchange programs in the past.
But my question was, what is the practice? What is the practice of delegating tasks to the executive committee from the Senate?
There's no delegation.
Okay, all right. Now let's get back to the motion.
There's no delegation, was the response.
I've read the first motion. I'm now going to call for a vote on the first motion. All those in favor of that motion, please raise your hands. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. I'm now going to read the second motion, that the Senate requires that the agreement between the University of Ottawa and the Gerald Schwartz and Heather Reisman Foundation be entirely disclosed to it and made public, and that the Joint Masters of Law exchange program should be frozen and the application put on hold until the above action has been carried out, I guess not by the Senate, but...
Right. Now, Mr. Rock, I believe it would be a good time to answer that question that I posed. Can we see the scholarship agreement?
Well, you've called upon the Senate to pass a motion requiring that it be disclosed. Let's put it to the vote and we'll find out.
Much simpler to have a simple yes or no answer.
I'm responding to your motion, Mr. Hickey. You've made this motion. I'm now going to put it to a vote. All those in favor of that motion?
Before we take the vote, members of the Senate, I would like to know if the President's office will make the scholarship agreement public. Will the agreement be made public?
I don't even know if there is a scholarship agreement, Mr. Hickey. I have no possession of it. And as I told you Friday when we met, you should look to the website for information about all of these matters. Now I'm going to put your motion. You've just called upon the Senate to require the production of these documents. All those in favor?
I believe
Any opposed?
I believe that it's much simpler to answer the question now.
Abstentions? That motion fails.
I didn't have a chance to vote on the motion.
I'm now going to put the third motion. In order to ensure fair and equitable access of all persons to the program in question without discrimination, the Senate requires the affirmative action guarantee that applications be selected in such a way that the percentage of Palestinian students accepted into the program at the University of Haifa be equal to or greater than the percentage of Palestinian people living in Israel, and that the Joint Masters in Law exchange program shall be frozen and the application process put on hold until the above actions have been carried out by the Senate. All those in favor of that motion? Opposed? Abstentions? That motion fails. I turn to the next motion, that the Senate will hear the community concerns regarding institutional academic exchanges with Israel from representatives of all concerned parties from the university community in view of reconsidering its approval of the Haifa project, and the Joint Masters in Law exchange program shall be frozen and the application process put on hold until the above actions have been carried out by the Senate. All those in favor of that motion? Opposed? Abstentions? That motion fails. And finally, the Senate will hear the community concerns regarding institutional...
That's the end. We did no.
You want to run that by me again? Why are we voting?
We did, because we voted that we've done the fourth one.
Okay. Then we'll do, the next motion is that the Joint Masters...
But we voted that one. That was part of all the motion. Is it a motion by itself?
Mr. Hickey, are you proposing that the last paragraph is a motion by itself, the fifth operative paragraph?
No.
Okay. Well, then that concludes the matter. And we can pass to the next item on the agenda, which is a report on undergraduate student elections. François?
Oui, il y a eu les élections au niveau des étudiants de premier cycle. Vous avez eu la liste de quoi des noms. Il y a 6 facultés qui ont élu un représentant par faculté par acclamation. Pelletier School of Management, Andrei Adamczyk. Faculté des Arts, Marie-Claude Noël. Faculté of Engineering, Nick Zone. Faculté des Sciences, Rosie Fournier. Faculté of Health Sciences, Kyle Rick. Et Faculté des Sciences sociales, Hazel Gazoka. Ils ont été élus par acclamation. 3 facultés n'ont pas élu leurs représentants, droit, médecine et éducation, et les candidatures sont ouvertes. Donc, ça conclut pour les élections à ce moment pour les représentants du premier cycle au Sénat.
Le rapport est présenté pour l'information aux membres du Sénat. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions ou commentaires? Oui, madame.
I just have a question. We're not confirming these people because I definitely know that one of them is not going to be a full-time student for next year, as she was elected to the SFU executive at the same time. So this isn't a confirmation. This is just a report, correct?
Yeah. It's a report of the election.
Okay, it's just not a. Okay, that's all.
So if they don't fill the requirement, then they won't be able to say there will be another election.
Okay, thank you.
Alors, La prochaine, c'est le rapport du collègue universitaire. Linda Garcia.
Okay, so we had a meeting on February 10th, and with the academic colleagues, it was not a full council meeting. The full council meeting is in early April, and we are hosting it here at the University of Ottawa. So this was an academic colleagues meeting. We typically have invite a speaker on the evening before that we have our meeting. This time, it was Dr. Carol Rollheiser, who's the director of the Center for Teaching Support and Innovation, Pamela Gravestock, and Emily Greenleaf, and they spoke about a new course evaluation framework for the University of Toronto. So they did a little bit of research that was funded by HECO to look at course evaluations. Just before the meeting, I asked permission if I was allowed to send this report to you, and I have gotten permission to do so, so you should have it in your email if you haven't seen it already. So generally, the recommendations were we needed to make sure that we ensured validity in our teaching evaluations. Institutions should constitute what effective teaching is, and then design the instruments as a result of that. And then we should also standardize our administration. So it's funny, as you sit around the table with all of these other colleagues, you realize what's being done in other universities. And for instance, at the University of Toronto, I found out they had something like 14 or 15 different ways of evaluating courses across the campus and their different campuses. So they were pushing to try and standardize that. And to ensure utility so that the students know what the information, get the information about administration and use, that they access appropriate evaluation results and so on, and for the faculty as well to know what's being evaluated, how that information is being used. So all this to say, that the University of Toronto now is using this data to try and put in place a teaching evaluation. My discussion with my colleagues, I felt that at Ottawa, in some of the standardization, the points that were being brought up were, many of the things that they were bringing up in the report that we were already doing, I think, at Ottawa U. But you can read the report and judge for yourself. The reactions to that talk, the next morning we had some conversation around that talk. Mark Green from uOIT was suggesting that in Alberta there was a system where professors, if there were 2 standard deviations from the university mean, they would consider that as being some evaluation that that the course needed to be relooked at. So you would use it for formative purposes to discuss with the professor. And that if there were 2 standard deviations above the mean at the university, that you should definitely sit down and look at perhaps some teaching awards and so on. There was a lot of talk about, are we talking about evaluating the courses? Are we talking about evaluating the professors? The representative from Guelph was suggesting, a lot of suggestions came through, and one of them was about these mid-session evaluations, and there were recommendations around doing what she calls the stop, start, continue. So halfway through the course, she asks students to submit without, in an anonymous form, you take a piece of paper, you write, what should I stop doing, what should I start doing, what should I continue doing? And they would ask the students to do this themselves as well. What should you stop doing, what should you start doing, what should you continue doing, so that they get a bit of a sense of responsibility for their learning. There was a lot of discussion, a little bit of discussion around teaching courses, teaching grad students how to teach, so that if they end up in academic positions, and that it was also very important to ask students who had graduated from the programs about their evaluations about learning, because a lot of the colleagues were saying that sometimes they get the aha moments about what they've learned once they've left the university and are either have moved on, and then they realize that some of these courses that they felt were painful while they were at university are now probably some of the ones that have contributed the most to their learning. We got a report about the executive heads that had met. They met with the chairs of the boards of directors as well. And there was discussion around the pension focus and solvency relief. And apparently there will be, at that point we had our meeting, there would be a paper that would be released around solvency issue. So institutes with solvency problems can apply for relief, but they needed to prepare a plan. And if that came forth, then they would be able to move on to plan number 2. There were no major discussions, no major announcements because we're in pre-election and pre-budget and so on, and so the government wasn't moving too much or going on the thin ice too much at this point. There was some discussion around credit transfer. Some of you might have seen that there were $74 million that was given for and some allocations to institutions around credit transfer. A working group has been set up to look at this and metrics proposed of how to do this. One of the ideas as well the working group is putting together is that some of the money would support a portal, a web-based portal for students to look at and be able to determine and look at credit transfer from that perspective. There was some discussion around the Online Institute. The Online Institute will not be an institute that offers degrees, and there is some talk that maybe this Online Institute would be one of the mechanisms that could be used to look at credit transfer. Okay? The online paper that I was the author for that you guys saw, it should be online shortly. I thought I had given it to them in November and discovered that they hadn't put it. So it should appear on the Council of Ontario Universities shortly. Some discussion around Aboriginals. There was a strong interest to provide resources, to provide advice to institutions. The biggest issue around that is for Aboriginals to self-identify and the questions around that. What are the questions that we should be asking around that? There's also a toolkit that will be coming out for the uOttawa, which is the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. So that institutions can start looking at the toolkit. A lot of talk around built environments and how we're going to make our institutions accessible. In terms of committees from our colleagues and their updates, some of the stuff, the Quality Council, all the universities have put their ICAPs in except one. They're planning to put more information up on their website. They're still discussing what a new program and what a major modification would be. And this is what seems to be holding up some of the full approvals. The ministry did a survey, just looking at government relations. The ministry did a survey to look at what Ontarians were feeling about upper education, post-secondary education, and but they had things like what are the most important issues for you, and of course health came up, and post-secondary education was not extremely high on that. However, when they surveyed, they also found that 2/3 of the people who were surveyed were satisfied with the education that they were getting in Ontario, and this included the majority of students and parents. So as you know, the colleagues are always working on a next discussion paper, and the one that's been drafted so far, this one coming up, is on the development of teaching stream positions within universities and the pros and cons around that. So a draft is going around that, and I will be able to send it off to you so you can react to it as well. And that's the report. And as I said, the council meeting will be held at the University of Ottawa in April.
Thank you, Linda. Are there questions or comments arising from the report? Marcel?
Questions, because you mentioned about the credit transfers, and you also mentioned the Online Institute would like to be involved somewhat. Right? Does it mean that the 74 million, some of it would go to the Online Institute?
It wasn't spoken in those terms at all. It was just when they were moving, the only movement in terms of the Online Institute was because it's an online course, it makes it easier for students, and so they were saying that maybe we could find some solutions around credit transfer through the Online Institute. But there was no mention that some of the money from the 74 million would go to that Online Institute. That was not mentioned.
Autre question, Claude?
What are the timelines for the document of the teaching-only stream? When is it going to be available?
I think the intention is to present it to council in April, when they're here.
Alors,
I'll see if I can. I'm sorry. I'll see if I can circulate it in its draft form, so that you can react to it before it gets presented to council.
je sais que je parle pour tout le monde lorsque je vous remercie, Linda, d'avoir pris le temps de contribuer comme membre de ces comités. Ça prend beaucoup de temps et effort, et d'ailleurs les réunions sont pour la plupart à Toronto. Alors merci bien pour votre générosité et pour cette information importante. Alors, collègues, on peut passer à la prochaine item, c'est-à-dire les décisions du comité exécutif du Sénat, la réunion du 17 janvier 2011. C'est ici à fin d'information. Et puis, on arrive à autre question. Mr. Hickey, I undertook to come back to the question of this agreement. I wonder if I could ask the Dean of the Common Law section to tell us what is the status, if any, of any agreements or agreement?
Yes, the agreement is completed. It's an innocuous document in the same form as hundreds of others just like it at the university. Certainly the Faculty of Law and I understand the Dean of Graduate Studies have no objection to it being made public. I don't believe they usually are, but there's no reason not to. Vice President DeMello or Vice President Uhl may have a different opinion, but from our end, that would be fine. It was referred to earlier as a signed agreement. It was not the practice at the time that agreement was negotiated for donors to sign. It may be today, but it was not then, so this is not a signed document. Probably 3/4 of the document deals with the scholarship terms and the method by which the scholarship is awarded. This too is pretty well a standard template at the University of Ottawa. I think it's being translated now, and the moment it's translated, it'll be on the graduate studies part of the law site, and I believe that the financial aid office routinely posts that information.
Thank you. Mr. Hickey?
So to confirm in response, the terms of reference of the scholarship agreement will be posted on the Common Law website. Is that correct?
No.
Will the, what was it that would be posted on the website?
The parts pertaining to how the scholarship is awarded and what the term is of the scholarship.
Right. So can we have a commitment that the terms of reference for the scholarship agreement will be made public? You had mentioned that there was no problem from your...
I just said it would be. I'm not really sure what you're asking me.
You had mentioned that perhaps Mr. DeMello or Mr. Gould...
What did you ask, Mr. DeMello?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it will be posted on the website under the financial aid because it speaks about what is the criteria for people to apply and what is the amount so long and so forth, like any other scholarship or bursary.
Right, in my many searches through that database, I've never seen in terms of reference of
well, it's not currently. It will be.
In terms of reference of scholarship?
Yes, it will.
Posted on the financial aid website?
Yep.
Thank you.
Autre question?
The second point before we move. Yeah, in the other business section. Are we ready for a new item?
If you have other business?
Yes. I've been informed by 3 postdoctoral resident students that they have at the University of Ottawa here, that they have filed a human rights complaint over discrimination and regarding dismissal that they've suffered at the University of Ottawa. They would like me to announce that there will be a press conference where they will tell the stories and make it public to the university community. And I will be going to gather more information at this press conference, and I'd like to let you all know about it so that if you're interested and concerned, you can be informed. I hope to bring some work on this to the next meeting of the Senate. In particular, I would like to read to you an email that was leaked about one of the students, Dr. Walid Al-Gaithi. And this leaked email is apparently from Dr. Richard Moulton, the chair of the Division of Neurosurgery at the University of Ottawa, to Dr. Yves Tsai of the Division of Neurosurgery. And the email is in the context of Dr. Al-Gaithi having made a complaint about the treatment he received from Dr. Tsai, I believe. Now, the email reads, Yves Tsai. It is uncertain whether Al-Gaithi et al. Would take this matter further to an external body, such as the Human Rights Tribunal. However, I can predict with certainty that fixing Al-Gaithi would deter the others from doing so. I have had discussions with the Dean and Chief of Surgery, and the consensus is that Algathi must be removed. Over the last few months, I have been working closely with Dr. Worthington and Dr. Bragg, and let me assure you that we are not that far. You have to appreciate here that we are dealing with a strong resident and probably the best we have, at least from an academic perspective. This, together with his popularity among the residents, made some of the conventional methods unsuccessful. At the end of the day, the university will not sacrifice one of its faculty members for the sake of a few disgruntled, outfunded residents, and I doubt it very much that the other complainants would prosecute you outside the campus in a process that is naturally protracted and financially draining. It's signed Richard Moulton. President Rock has received the leaked emails, and it's difficult to understand that Dr. Moulton continues to be the chair of the neurosurgery division while the investigation into this situation is ongoing, if indeed an investigation is happening. And the students would like me to present President Rock with an invitation to attend the press conference and make a statement about how he will address this persistent and troubling problem at the university. So I'd like to pass this invitation now.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Would you help me?
Really want to get into this?
It's not a question, it's just using the proper words. You said postdoctoral residents, so they are not postdoctoral fellows.
Okay.
Right?
So you are aware of the
No, I'm not aware. I'm asking you. Because you use a combination of two words that don't normally work together.
As I understand, yes, they are surgery residents.
Okay, so they're not postdoctoral fellows.
No, they have medical degrees, and they're training to be surgeons.
Thank you. All right, any other questions before the Senate, before I adjourn? If not, thank you very much. À la prochaine fois.